The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Anime Thursdays once again on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt with you in the studio. So glad to have you along with us once again for another Thursday night of anime news and notes, and then kind of an interesting concept in part number 2 of tonight's program. But we're glad to have you along with us, of course, live on Twitch, as we are each and every Thursday night. And of course, you can catch us on the VOD on Twitch, on YouTube, and of course, your favorite podcast outlet as well. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going. It is another Anime Thursday with, like you mentioned, kind of an interesting theme to it. Definitely gave me a chance to look up some shows that I hadn't watched in a while to see if I could remember anything about them or why I seem to like them more than most people. But yeah, it was good stuff.
I think the fascinating thing, and I'll just kind of briefly mention what we're going to do, and then we'll talk more about it in part number 2, is we saw a post somewhere where somebody was talking about like the best shows that were below a certain score on my anime list. So we've gone through shows that we have watched that we enjoyed and found shows that were rated below a 7 on my anime list, and then came up with what they call a 3x3, which is basically a square that has 9 different images in it that kind of reflect something.
It's your own custom Hollywood squares, essentially.
Basically, yeah. There's, no Richard Dawson in this, but
Shadow Stevens.
That guy not to be found anywhere, unfortunately. But it's just a good chance to kind of show it on display. So Mike and I have gone through this exercise, which is interesting because both of us have shows in each other's 3x3, or each 3x3 that the other have watched, but we didn't include in the 3x3, and I'll be honest, like, I have not done a great job of updating my anime list. I spent a lot of time today updating my anime list because I started on Anime News Network's page, and so I've had to manually try to enter this stuff in. So there were shows that are going to be on Mike's 3x3 that I probably would have included in mine, but had finally filled mine before I got to it. So it'll be interesting to see, and again, these are not by any means our top favorite shows of all time, but these are shows that we enjoyed, and we're a little surprised by the rating of them, or maybe not. We'll talk about that when we get to them. Maybe some of them are kind of rated where they should be when we get to that, but that'll be in part number 2 of today's podcast. Part number 1, we're just going to go through some news items, and we'll start off with kind of one that's just a recurring news item at this point, but it is worth discussing because it is something that's going to be continuing to grow in anime and manga, and that's the article from Anime News Network, which was posted today, talking about Shogakukan's plans to release a light novel app in the US and Canada using AI translation. Their goal is to release 400 works within 2 years, on this app called Novellas, which will translate these light novels into English. Obviously, they're looking to cut costs. They're looking to try to get these out quicker to try to cut off the market for piracy. But it's not the first. Obviously, we talked about a few weeks ago on the podcast a really good video on NHK World that talked about some technology. It still seemed a little more manual than what this sounds like. This sounds a lot more machine driven, so it'll be very interesting to see what the product looks like. But curious to kind of get your thoughts again, because again, it's a topic that's going to come up probably somewhat regularly when we talk anime and manga and music, and is this, the creeping AI, and where do you draw the line? How do how does the quality end up coming out? How does it affect the market? There's a lot of questions that we just don't have answers to at this point.
Yeah, and to your point, obviously, cost-cutting and increasing the output, that's the name of the game, especially with some of these titles that I assume wouldn't really make much of a dent here otherwise. So you're not going to release them in any digestible capacity in English unless you can do so on the cheap. I am kind of curious, what the state of the quality of that is right now and what it's going to be in 6 months from now. Because that's the big thing, is it's easy to dunk on AI when it looks like garbage now, but as we've seen in other AI-related ventures, it picks up on things quick and it learns fast. So it's not always going to be bad at what it does. I think that's one of the big takeaways. But the question again comes back up, and I think it's one of the big debates of our time is whose jobs are we okay with having eliminated due to AI? I think, right now we have video game voice actors striking due to AI protections in large part.
Yeah.
Anyone that's in the entertainment industry, they're so visible. Like their voices really are heard way louder than anyone in any other sector of employment. Like you don't hear insurance employees, getting out there and having their jobs protected from the looming threat of AI. So it really, who are we okay telling, go learn to code. Sorry, your job's lost. It's interesting how this is all going to play out.
And I think the side issue that kind of runs down the same parallel track as all this is who's training the AI. Because I think that's the other issue really across the board, but kind of specifically you mentioned the voice actors. When you're seeing their specific voices showing up in AI apps, and it's clear that, taking a Steve Blum or someone like that you're taking his voice and you're using an AI version of it. We've talked about it in music where these bands, mostly willingly, but at some point it will become non-willingly.
And you see it in visual arts as well, where it's clearly this thing was trained on my paintings because of what this looks like.
Correct.
It's a clear ripoff.
So, and that's, I think, where the line gets fuzzy. Because, like you said, the AI has been taking jobs from people who are generally nameless and faceless for a long time. I'm dealing with it in the writing industry where you're seeing these articles written by AI and you're seeing new AI trained Google searches that are just atrocious, but they're killing a lot of these affiliate websites because they're trying to pick the answers. They're not doing a very good job of it, but they're also not sending traffic to those sites either. So, it's we're not going to have the debate, and we're certainly not going to come to an answer because I don't think in our lifetime we're going to have a definitive answer. I think it's going to be something that is just as the technology evolves, as court cases start, because I don't think we've even gotten to that point yet where people are suing for their own, name, image, and likeness. The things we talk about in college sports. Because we've mentioned the music stories where you have the bands that are clearly using AI to continue to live on beyond what they can actually do, but you're also going to eventually have bands that are living on not by their own choice, and that's where you'll get some lawsuits. You're gonna get stuff. So I mean, it's across the board pretty much in all of our topics. It's a fascinating discussion. I mean, it's a little frightening, when you're in a world where you just don't know like what your retirement years are going to look like because you just don't know if your job's going to exist the way it is, and to some degree, you don't even know how to pivot because you don't know where those jobs are going to go. So it's a crazy time, and everybody's kind of got to figure out from a quality standpoint, from a morality standpoint, I guess, what you're good with and what you're not good with, and I don't know that the answer is crystal clear at this point.
It does kind of remind me of a story that broke about a week ago in the gaming side of things, where evidently Activision had created AI-generated cosmetics to sell in their cash shop that people were buying, not realizing it wasn't something that a developer actually created themselves. So I mean, it's everywhere, and I think if nothing else, I just want transparency. Give me that option, whether I want to support it or not. And maybe in some cases it makes sense. In other cases, maybe it makes me feel like a terrible person, and I don't. It's very similar in a lot of ways to kind of the physical media versus subscription model, where it's like, I want to know that I have something and you can't take it from me, whether it be a video game or a job. So
Yeah,
a lot of crazy issues.
Yeah,
to say the least.
No question about it. It's a very complicated issue. Again, it's the transparency of knowing what's being produced with it, so I can decide whether I want to support it. And I think it's the transparency of what you're taking from me to train your AI, and me having the ability very clearly to opt out of that if I so choose, without having to search for it. It's like trying to cancel an online subscription. You have to jump through every hoop, write a letter,
How many YouTube videos do you watch that are sponsored by some company that basically goes out and like takes your data back from data brokers? Like, did I agree to all that? Are you sure?
It's it's wild. It's a lot of stuff out there. So we'll certainly, it's going to be a topic we're going to discuss from time to time because it's just pervasive through all of our topics, and I think it's not.
Truth be told, it's a captivating topic.
It's
really interesting to talk about, whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, sometimes on either extreme, it's interesting, even if it in some cases is not great. But we'll certainly keep an eye on that, and we'll have to maybe check some of those translated manga out to see what the quality of those look like. A couple other smaller news items, but. The second one is the news that Dragon Ball Daima, which of course is the new Dragon Ball series, now has a premiere date. It's going to premiere at their Dai Matsuri on October the 6th. I would presume that we will see a Western release not too long after that, if I had to guess. Of course, this is a new series that was in development before the death of Akira Toriyama and will continue on. It appears to be another series where they've gone back and made Goku into a child again, kind of reminiscent of Dragon Ball GT.
They just can't stop themselves.
Which is so funny because I still feel like the original Dragon Ball is one of the most underrated series of all time, because Dragon Ball Z is maybe one of the most overrated series of all time.
Quite possibly.
And I think because Z just gets all the attention, that the original Dragon Ball gets left behind, and it feels like they always just try to be like, well, let's try to recapture that magic of the original series. And like I said, maybe this will do well. I think there will certainly be some early interest in it to see what it's going to look like. But I mean,
it's like they want to recapture that magic without realizing what about it was magical. It wasn't Goku being a child that made that story so good. It was the story. It was the characters. It was the relevance of the characters throughout. It was, when Krillin dies, you cared about it. It's things that once you tell me that no longer matters, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's so much about Dragon Ball Z couldn't maintain that same gravity to the story because nothing was permanent.
Yeah.
All it could really do at that point is become an action anime.
And it begs the question, and this is another topic we've talked about recently, why have they not just considered rebooting the original Dragon Ball?
That's a good question. I think it's definitely something that could use a fresh coat of paint. I think it would attract a lot of new viewers. It just seems like an obvious one.
I would think so. I mean, the original series, while it looks good for 1989 or whatever, 1986, the original series I think started. I think so. It's obviously, it was 1986. We're coming up on 40 years since the original Dragon Ball here in just a couple of years. And maybe when we get to the 40-year anniversary, maybe that's something they'll consider, that they'll just reboot the original series. But it feels like that's a better route to go, even though, yes, you're going to deal with the criticism, it's a cash grab, it's blah, 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 like all these other series deal with. But at the same time, like...
everything's a cash grab.
Yeah,
if you really want to be super cynical about it, everything is a cash grab.
Yeah, but it's, I think, a chance to get it into high definition and get a clean version of it and be able to... And maybe go the Kai route where you cut it down to 80 to 100 episodes. Like... there's a way to go about that. I'm curious about this new series. I'm really curious to see how it does. Do people tune in? Do people stay tuned in? What's the story going to be? Like, I'm really interested to see how this takes off.
Well, I also think one other thing, going back to Dragon Ball, it's easy for us to say the original Dragon Ball looks fine, but if you're, a preteen or teenager who's just now getting into anime and you're watching, Demon Slayer, you're not going to look at Dragon Ball and say, that looks all right. It's going to look so antiquated.
And it looks fine compared to a lot of other series of the mid-'80s.
Oh, sure.
You go through those opening lists and see...
there's the spectrum is there, man. Some of the stuff looks ahead of the time. Other things look like 1964.
But everything that's been cleaned up from that era looks relatively fine. But, yeah, I mean, that one, I don't think Dragon Ball's ever gotten like a work. It never got cleaned up, I don't think. A remaster, I guess, because there's no HD version as far as I know available.
Not that I'm aware of. Which, I mean, I could be totally wrong. I haven't really been keeping up with physical releases of the I mean, I know Dragon Ball Z's been re-released almost as many times as Evangelion.
It's a race, I think, at this point to see how many times that's come back out. But we'll see. The new series again coming in October. Imagine you'll see it stateside on some streaming platform not too long after that. And that'll be the interesting thing, too. And this is kind of a fascinating situation because obviously Dragon Ball has long since been the bell cow of Funimation. Well, Funimation's gone. It's now Crunchyroll. Does Crunchyroll get the rights to the new Dragon Ball? Obviously, I'm reading this article on Crunchyroll's website, so I'm sure they will be interested in it, but it's Dragon Ball. It's got a big name. There's going to be a lot of big money companies that are going to be interested in the rights, like Netflix and Hulu. And
the days of competing against ADV or Sentai or Geneon, that's nothing compared to your Netflix and Apple and...
Well, and at what point do some of these big Japanese distributors just handle it themselves? They just say, we're going to do it.
We're going to run it on New Japan World. Good luck watching it.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's about like trying to find Olympic sports on Peacock. Like, good luck. So we'll see. But again, something we'll keep an eye on with the new Dragon Ball series coming in October. Also coming soon to your local television is the new season of Demon Slayer. The Swordsmith Village arc is going to be coming to Toonami on August 11th, which is Sunday morning. Saturday is the 10th. The 1 hour premiere will start at midnight before it'll eventually move to 12:30 a.m. Starting August 17th. This is a show that always has felt like a no-brainer for Toonami. It's just crazy popular, but certainly, I think people are going to be excited to see the new arc coming to television. And again, we were talking off the air, the new Toonami block is pretty solid. I mean, there's a pretty good group of shows that currently make up the new Toonami.
Yeah, absolutely. Demon Slayer's been great for them, I'm sure. Really cool to see the newest arc going to be premiering. It really makes you wonder now, and you want to look at historically some of the Toonami and Adult Swim blocks they've had over the years since the late 90s to now, and really kind of look at how this stacks up compared to some of those. I mean, you're looking at Demon Slayer, Swordsmith Village arc, One Piece, Naruto Shippuden, Dragon Ball Z Kai, Ninja Kamui, and My Hero Academia. That's, I've heard mixed about Ninja Kamui, but everything else on that, as far as what you'd expect from anime on Cartoon Network, it's hard to go wrong with that.
And, of course, a reminder that they are doing the Toonami Rewind block during the weeks as well that has evidently done decently well so far. There's a lot of talk about that potentially growing. So anime on television is still hanging in there. It's kind of funny as we talk about the physical media market, struggling a bit, and maybe the anime boom. There's too many shows. So for all the negative stories that come out, it's good to see that the quote-unquote free TV, it's cable, but that is free compared to...
That is basic television in 2024.
It is. That, you can still watch a lot of these shows with just a cable subscription. You don't need any additional streaming service. So
I'm kind of curious what the demographic information is on both that after a Friday afternoon block and then also their nightly or weekend night anime. It's my understanding that young people don't really watch television. They're on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and all these other areas that aren't cable television.
Yeah.
I mean, is it possible that the old school block is actually outdrawing the modern stuff?
And I think the question, and again, this is we're going to really jump into something totally different, so I won't get too far off this, but one thing that's been really interesting for me with the Olympics that have been airing is how big the demo numbers are. Obviously, we just got the numbers on AEW, which did very poorly last night.
What did it do? I didn't see that.
Just over 600,000. And part of it is the Olympics on USA last night drew a 1.32 in the I'll have to double check the numbers on that again. The demo numbers were big. I think it was 1.32 million on the the viewership. I can't remember what the demo was, but it was number one for cable. And NBC's numbers were crazy again. Again, this is taped coverage. This is stuff that's airing where the demos in the twos for 18 to 49. So it's just, are some of the young people who are going to TikTok or whatever, when there's something that they can't get anywhere else, they're still finding their way back to television, and maybe something like this Toonami block can benefit from that, where it's hey, it's still cheaper to do it this way than it is to subscribe to 6 different streaming services.
Possibly. And I also wonder, too, is it through like Instagram and TikTok that some of these Olympians are actually becoming social media stars where the young people are actually seeking them out? People who wouldn't even be interested in the sports to begin with, but they know Simone Biles, so they're going to tune in whenever she's on TV.
Congratulations to her winning the all-around today after winning the team championship yesterday. But you bring up a good point because we just talked to our niece this weekend who follows on
A rugby player
who then went viral for just trucking some poor rugby player from somewhere in a game, and it's like maybe that is it. Maybe that's the secret. You build your brand on these social media, and then you kind of funnel them back to the traditional media to get to see how they're doing.
Which is brilliant because, I mean, I think through my childhood and early adulthood, there were a lot of times where I didn't know or care who any of the people, beyond just representing our country, I didn't care about any of the Olympic athletes. Like maybe they found a way to circumvent that and say, okay, we're going to become stars, and now you're going to seek us out because of that.
You mean you didn't care about Dan versus Dave?
Someone brought that up, and I think the Zennials subreddit.
1992.
And, did they both just kind of bust?
One of them did. I can't remember if it was Dan or Dave. One of them did not qualify for the Olympics.
Okay, I seem to remember that kind of being a fizzle as far as this big, Nike promotion or whoever it was, Reebok or...
The fascinating thing about that, and then we'll get to our last story because I know we're jumping off the anime topic, but they were in the... Was it the pentathlon or the biathlon? Well, they were in one of the, multi...
Decathletes.
Yes, yeah. There we go. I knew it was one of those. I couldn't get there. They were in the decathlon. So, and at that time, I don't know if they thought that was going to become like this big sport. But the decathlon, if you watch on the NBC's coverage, it's hard to track it because they just cut into the events. Because it's like field events, except for a couple of running events. So it's like, well, now we're going to go to the decathlon, pole vault or the long jump or whatever it is.
It was Ninja Warrior before Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, absolutely. So
they just didn't find the correct way to televise that and make it interesting.
Chris joining us from not parts unknown tonight, actually joining us from Boston, where he's up there for a concert. That's kind of ties into our other show, our metal show.
Let's talk about Boston.
Yeah, the band or the city or the but I don't know if there is an Olympic anime. It's interesting you mentioned
there has to be,
though, Chris, because that's going to tie into our last story we're going to talk about. Of course, volleyball going on at the Olympics. I think the U.S. is off to a pretty good start on the volleyball side, men's and women's. But there, kind of noteworthy was yesterday there was a volleyball match conducted between Japan and Argentina. And as it turns out, whoever was running the DJ music clearly has some sort of knowledge of anime because during the match, they played themes from the anime haiku, which is haiku, not haiku. That'd be interesting.
They play volleyball and write just
poetry.
Exquisite poetry.
Haiku, the songs Phoenix and Fly High were played during the match. Of course, both from the Burnout Syndromes.
I want to believe that they just Googled Japanese volleyball anthems. What do they play in the arena during volleyball in Japan? And they just stumbled on these Anna songs instead.
I mean, I think if you just Google Japanese volleyball, period, that would be the first thing that would come up is haiku. So just interesting that clearly, as we talked last week, a lot of sports anime that are on Crunchyroll you can watch for free with ads right now during the Olympics. So still an opportunity to do that, including haiku, one of the shows that are available. Does not say, actually it does. Japan won the match 3-1, so maybe that music fired them up, and they played Fly High after Japan won the match.
Well, of course.
So
I'm still hoping for a Prince of Tennis real life sports situation because you've never seen the instance in high level tennis where the player starts out playing right-handed and infuriates his opponent, and then you find out he was actually left-handed the entire time, and then he just totally schools him.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some tennis players in high school switch hands when they hit shots, but it's never because they have a secret weapon. It's really because they don't want to hit a backhand.
Yeah, I just saw that today in practice, so yeah, that does
Or they might not know which hand they're actually dominant with. I don't really know.
Yeah, it's always interesting. Never a dull moment when you're coaching high school tennis. So But yeah, interesting stuff. The Olympics continues on. Again, just a reminder, if you are watching your week-to-week anime and you notice that maybe an episode doesn't upload this week or next week, there's a good chance it's on whatever network in Japan, NHK, I think, that is showing the Olympics. So good chance it'll be back in a couple of weeks, and then your schedule will get back to regular schedule after that.
That's worked out pretty well for me because I've kind of stepped away from the new stuff, and I'm like 5 episodes left of Outlaw Star,
Nice.
so I'm kind of killing it right now.
Yeah, so that's something you can do when you got the break from the new stuff. You can jump into some old stuff as well. So we're going to talk about old stuff coming up after the break. We're going to be giving everybody our 3x3s for anime that we watched and enjoyed, but is ranked less than 7 on my anime list. And that was a very interesting exercise. We're going to be giving a chance to talk about a little bit about these shows, what they're rated, and kind of our thoughts on that. So if you're listening on the podcast version, we're going to step aside for a break. When we come back, we're going to talk anime 3x3s, and we'll do that on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, live on Twitch, as we are each and every Thursday night. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. We've got all kinds of great stuff on there, including our store. We have a Ko-fi page that's linked there if you want to help support the Nerdcast Empire. Of course, we have our backlog of podcasts that you can check out. And we've got more podcasts coming up on Saturday, probably about 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be recapping SummerSlam live from Cleveland, Ohio. Looks like it's going to be a great card, another big event for the WWE that'll be coming up again late Saturday night. So make sure you tune in for that. And then we'll be back 7 o'clock Eastern Time on Sunday for Music Weekly. We are on to the music of July the 19th?
Yes.
19th already. So we are continuing on. We've kind of gotten a preview of the music this week. Some good stuff in there. I think we'll be able to find some good stuff to share with you on Sunday night, so make sure you check that out. And, of course, you can watch our VODs on Twitch. You can watch our VODs on YouTube. You can listen to previous podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. Search Nerdcast Empire. We are on to episode 83 this week, closing in on 100 episodes. We just passed the 1-year mark of the Nerdcast Empire. We're very grateful to everyone who has supported us throughout this journey. And as we continue on, try to make things bigger and better in year number 2 here on the Nerdcast Empire. We're going to talk anime 3x3s, and this was a topic that I think I probably first saw when they were discussing it on Trash Taste, because they were doing 3x3s.
I think I've done those numerous times.
Yeah.
Various anime-related subjects.
Absolutely. Some of them are like their cursed 3x3s, where it's just like the shows that you don't want to admit to anybody that you watch, but they did. We went through our lists, and basically we're trying to find shows that we watched and enjoyed, but they were rated below a 7 on my anime list, which 7's still a pretty good score. It is amazing, as I went through today and rated so many shows and went through to see what the ratings were, how many shows were in my library that were rated between 7 and 8, which is...
It's kind of my default setting, to be totally honest.
That is kind of the ballpark, the shows. So when I watch them, they just kind of typically fall in that range. I had some over 8s. I didn't really have any below 6, I don't think, that were... which is probably good.
I got a couple, but...
It's when you get down there, it's either the show's not great, or maybe it didn't live up to expectations, or maybe it just doesn't look great nowadays. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that might happen, but there's some interesting shows when you start getting down into the 6s that are like, I didn't think this was that bad, but some people did. And some of these reviews, and that's something we're going to do in a later episode, is we'll read some of these reviews that people left, because, man, people are very harsh on these shows. And I just wonder, what were they thinking when they started these shows, that they thought this was going to be the next Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and they got a show that was a dumpster fire?
And I think that's one of my takeaways, too, is that I don't rank things against each other.
Yeah.
I rank it based on what I thought it set out to do and how well it executed on that. Like, some shows I thought were amazing aren't award-winning great shows. They just are what they are. Some of them are stupid. Some of them are, just kind of trash shows. But if they entertain me, they entertain me. I'm not deducting points for that.
I think anything that I enjoy, that I've come away thinking that was worth my time,
Yeah.
starts at a 6 at that point. Like, it's at least a 6, usually a 7. If I get to the end of it and think that was fun, like, and then if it's like that was fun and it was also good, then it starts getting the 8, 9. And it's funny because I've ranked a lot of things masterpiece on Anime News Network that when I kind of went back and started moving them over to my anime list,
Yeah.
there weren't as many that got 10s.
I think there should be a limit to how many 10s you give.
Yeah.
Just because you can't really think that many are masterpieces unless you just really love all of it. And that just it seems... One thing I thought was interesting, because I, like you, originally ranked a lot of the stuff on Anime News Network, and there isn't really a one-to-one translation from their ranking system to my anime list. It's they both have masterpiece at the top of the mountain, but then from there, what's better, great or excellent?
I think it's excellent, but I only know that because I've been rating things on there.
Those are both the second, essentially the number 9 of your rankings. From there, they both have very good and good. Then you have fine and decent. Those don't sound the same to me.
No.
Decent sounds not as good as fine. But I think the definition of fine has been devalued over the years to where now it used to be, oh, that's fine. It doesn't mean that anymore.
No.
It's fine. It's fine.
Decent to me kind of feels like a show I went into watching that I wasn't like, okay, I like, this isn't going to be great. And then it ended up being all right. It's like, well, that was decent.
It's like the equivalent of 4, 5, and 6 rankings on Anime News Network are 6 decent, 5 so-so, 4 not really good. I don't think there's a single integer difference between those 3 terms.
No.
They all kind of sound the same to me.
Yeah. So it's tough. It's not easy to rate these. And some people, I'm sure, just like with Cage Match that we talk about on the wrestling side, take this way too seriously. And you'll see it every time there's a new show that's doing really, really well, because the fans of the other shows that have been rated high historically will rush in and lower the rating of the show by rating bombing it. So,
but it's like you talk about your average rating is 7 and 8. I think that's just because on Anime News Network you go from 7 being good to 6 being decent.
Yeah.
If you like the show at all, you kind of feel like you're sliding it to call it decent.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. So that's why this is kind of interesting, because these shows are going to fall in the mostly. I don't know if any of yours got below 6, but generally in the 6 to 7 range. I don't think
for this exercise, I had a few under 6, but none that were.
The other thing too, when
it's a show I had to like to include.
Yeah,
so
right, because I did kind of specify this had to be something that was enjoyable.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, some of these shows that were rated low kind of all felt like the same kind of shows, and I didn't really want to like pigeonhole myself as, oh, he's that anime fan that likes these type of shows, because there are a lot of like harem shows that fall this low because people just get all worked up about harem shows and they rate them low. Like Love Hina was like a 7.01 or something like that. So it just went above the cut line.
I've not watched all that, but I seem to recall it being fine at what it was.
Exactly. That is definitely the definition of it did what it set out to do. Fun show, but like, I can see where people wouldn't like it. It was definitely one I thought was going to be below 7, and it wasn't. So I couldn't include it on my list. But let's get to the list. We'll start with yours. So what we'll do first is we'll just have you introduce the shows. Then we'll kind of go through row by row, talk about what it rated, maybe what you rated it, and then kind of any thoughts we have on those shows.
Can we go ahead and just throw out all 9 like right at one time?
Yep. So we're going to pop yours up on the screen. So if you're watching the video version of this on Twitch or on YouTube, you now see Mike's 3x3 up on the screen. What do you got for us? Just the shows in your 9.
Yeah, so starting at the top left there, we have 2008's Chaos Head, followed by 2001's Soul Taker, 2003's Dot Hack Legend of the Twilight. Second row, we have 2009's The Sacred Blacksmith, 2020's Uzaki-chan Wants to Hang Out, Samurai Deeper Kyo from 2002. Then we have 1991's Here is Greenwood, Fushigi Yugi Ekoden from 2001, and Rising of the Shield Heroes Season 2 from 2 years ago.
Interesting stuff there. And there are some of those shows I have seen. There are a couple other ones that I kind of wanted to watch and just fell into the anime vortex that is all the shows in my playlist that I never got back to. But let's start with that top row, because Chaos Head is a show that I watched and I really enjoyed, and I was really surprised when you told me that it didn't get to 7, because it seemed better than that, but give us the rating on those top 3 shows, and then kind of your thoughts on those shows.
Yeah, so the My Anime List score for these 3 shows, Chaos Head had a 6.29, Soul Taker had a 6.29, and Dot Hack Legend of the Twilight had a 6.55.
6.29 seems low to me for those first 2.
Looking into it, specifically for Chaos Head, I have to wonder if a couple things happened. You had, obviously, Steins Gate, which was huge. Did people jump back and watch Chaos Head after Steins Gate thinking they were going to get something along that same vein? And it's not, I mean, are they tied together being part of the whole, like, science adventure, graphic novel, virtual novel or visual novel?
Yes.
Series, sure. I also heard that the story in the anime does kind of significantly differ from the visual novel, so that could be part of the issue too.
I can see that.
Some people also found the story to be confusing and convoluted, so I think there are ways you might accidentally jump into this show not knowing what you're going to get, and that's what you get.
I think that's reasonable. It was, like I said, I enjoyed it. I think I watched it after Steins Gate. I feel like I went back and watched it and then went ahead and watched Robotics Notes later.
Yeah.
And there's still a couple shows in that series I haven't watched, but it's just a little surprising that it's rated so low. Now,
Soul Taker doesn't shock me a whole lot. Soul Taker has, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it, almost an off-putting anime style at times, where you're just like, why are we so zoomed in on this one thing? Why are we not seeing any action? Like they were trying something totally different with that show. Looking into it, that's actually Tatsunoko's first anime to feature digital animation.
Okay.
And their first to air in HD. So, it could be they were just kind of trying to go for some sort of eye-popping visual style that maybe didn't land with everybody. It was a strange show, so I could maybe see where that wasn't for everybody. As for Legend of the Twilight Hack, the obvious criticism here is this followed Hack Sign, which is very brooding and dark. This was very bubbly and kind of child-oriented and way lighter than Hack Sign was, so I can totally see where people might have been a little disappointed in that show, even though I thought it was entertaining.
I mean, the music alone should have given it a 7.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got great music. And
I feel the same about Soul Taker.
That's true, too. It's got maybe the best song on this list, and that says a lot. But interesting top row. Again, I've seen Chaos Head. Little surprise. I guess I'm not totally shocked after you kind of described it. It does make sense why that might have ended up here. In row 2, real quick, and then I'll let you give the scores on this one. Sacred Blacksmith was one that I started and I just never got back around to, but the episodes I watched were fine. Uzaki-chan is one that I think I ended up watching before you got to it, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Like, there was a show I didn't necessarily think I would enjoy because the clips I had seen of it kind of painted her as very annoying. But I think once I got into the show and realized that they kind of both give and take somewhat equally, that it kind of became more endearing. She is very hyper and kind of annoying. Even
if he wasn't relatable, I think the show would have struggled.
Yeah, I agree with that. If he was just getting run over, and he wasn't, it was. I thought it was a good show. But yeah, go ahead and give me the scores on those 3.
Yeah, so for those 3, Sacred Blacksmith had a 6.65. I gave it an 8 because, I'm super optimistic. Uzaki-chan Wants to Hang Out got a 6.98, so
almost
right there, yeah. And Samurai Deeper Kyo had a 6.89, so again, we're getting pretty close to respectability.
Yeah, those are reasonably scored, I think, because they're about 7 to 8 would be probably where I would put Uzaki-chan, so I don't have any issue with that.
Yeah.
And Samurai Deeper Kyo is one I think I've started as well and never got around to finishing. But
Sacred Blacksmith and Samurai Deeper Kyo, I can kind of understand the score, for no other reason, because I don't remember much about either of them. Going back to Sacred Blacksmith, Theron Martin from Anime News Network gave it a B, basically saying it's not an elite show by any means, but you could do worse in that genre. So, again, it's fine. Uzaki-chan, I think it probably was the recipient of some spiteful scoring because there was definitely some backlash against her as a character due to her character design, so to speak.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
It's unfortunate, but that definitely happened. As far as Samurai Deeper Kyo, that was kind of funny because, again, I don't remember much about it. I know it had a good open, and I enjoyed it because I enjoy anything that takes place in any kind of historical period in Japan, whether it's totally, fictionalized to the point of being absurd or what. I still find that entertaining. Some of the reviews on IMDb for it stated, one of which said, truly underrated anime. Okay. Decent standalone anime, but cannot even give the brilliant manga a run for its money. So definitely a fan of the manga, which I heard is good. Then you had Poor Man's Inuyasha, kind of unfortunate. And my favorite one just said, horrible has a new name. They gave it a 1 out of 10. They weren't a fan. Going through this has made me kind of want to go back and rewatch a couple of these shows just to see if I still feel the same way. Yeah. This is definitely one of those.
That is horrible as a new name. That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, good stuff.
Bottom row, I Heroes Greenwood was basically the gag anime for the longest time because we saw it everywhere, and eventually you just were like, I have to buy this, and I knew you enjoyed it when you watched it. The other two shows are not shows that I have watched, but I'm a little surprised that they're not rated a little higher, but kind of curious. I guess we'll get the scores on those and then kind of your thoughts on those three.
Yeah, so here's Greenwood came in at a 6.77. Fushigi Yugi Eikuden came in at 6.8, and Rising of the Shield Hero Season 2 at 6.52.
Now, I know the Shield Hero one, I remember reading...
It had some problems.
Some criticism of that specific season. I feel like it and... what was the show with the kids?
Promised Neverland.
The Promised Neverland Season 2. I feel like those two were in a competition for, like, worst follow-up to what was a really good start to the show.
Yeah, and I probably overrated Shield Hero Season 2, probably for the same reason I overrated Fushigi Yugi Eikuden. I really liked the characters in both those shows. I think Shield Hero suffered because it almost was like The Office when Jim and Pam got together. Now what do you do?
Yeah.
The kind of the conflict in season 1 was more or less resolved, so now what? And their answer to that was, well, let's just have them fight a giant turtle and introduce a bunch of characters that you may or may not care about. And then they kind of kept doing that. Like that just kind of became the mode of the show. There were really cool characters. Like the 4 original Cardinal Heroes were really cool, and I feel like they didn't fully capitalize off of what you could do with them after the first season. And I didn't hate it, but I understand why it got kind of killed by critics. Greenwood, though, here's Greenwood from 1991. Like you mentioned, that was kind of the gag show for years, seeing it in Suncoast and joking that I was going to buy it one day and watch it. And, now looking back, it was basically Kids on the Slope before Kids on the Slope was a thing. Turns out Kids on the Slope was a lot better, if I remember correctly. I gave Here's Greenwood a 7, but again, going back to the Anime News Network rankings, that's because 7 is good and 6 is decent. It wasn't just decent. That's doing it a disservice, I think.
Sure.
But yeah, an interesting thing about that, as I was reading up on it, evidently the English dub on the DVD set was different than the English dub on the VHS and Laserdisc releases.
That's weird.
I'm not sure what kind of weird licensing situation that show had going on, but a show from 1991,
who knows?
You never know. If I did more research, I'm sure I could figure it out, but that just kind of struck me as strange. Going into Fushigi Yugi, this is like the last of the OVAs. It follows the 7th and 8th volumes of Fushigi Yugi Gaiden, the light novels. My problem with Fushigi Yugi is that I really love the characters, and clearly so did the creators, but they didn't seem to like how any of the animated series ended, so they basically would use the OVAs to, like, recreate the conflict from the original show just to end it differently. At least that was kind of how I took it. It's something that I think could definitely stand to be redone from the beginning, just to give you a full, complete... And I don't know what the light novels, how they play out, but if you want to do it more accurate to them, if necessary, that's fine. The music in the show was great. The characters were great. The OVAs all kind of felt unnecessary. So I gave it a high score because I liked the characters, but nothing about it really felt necessary.
I feel like there are a lot of shows like that once you kind of get a group of characters you like, you kind of overlook the flaws of the show. And You're just like, I just wanted more stories with these characters. One series that I don't think made my list. I think it managed to stay just above the Mendoza line of anime, was Galaxy Angel. Like, it's a show that it was another kind of show that was same, like, people that did, like, DigiCarrot did Galaxy Angel. So it was also kind of like selling merch. But I really enjoyed the characters in that show.
Grab.
It's all a cash grab. But, like, every new series was basically like the last one. It was doing, each character did something funny or something dumb, and they would have to bail them out. But at the same time, I enjoyed it, even though it didn't break any new ground. Like, you just want more episodes of the character, so you kind of put up with it. But I can definitely see where that can be an issue if you're just trying to judge it based on the quality of that one show.
Yeah.
But so there's your 3x3. Certainly a very good 3x3, and again, some shows maybe to check out there if you want to see some older shows or some newer shows that maybe aren't rated as high. But we will now pop my 3x3 up on this, and like I said, this was an interesting process here. So we'll go through my 9 shows real quick. Let me pull up the Discord because I have them listed, which is going to make this a lot easier, even though I think that I can probably do it on memory. But my 9 shows started off with El Hazard, The Alternative World, El Hazard, The Wanderers, which I misspelled in my list. Mabarajo is number 3. Nadesco, The Prince of Darkness movie, number 4, which is the middle row left. Center square is Maho Sensei Negima. Then Shikamori is Not Just a Cutie on the right. And then bottom left, All-Purpose Cultural Catgirl Nuku Nuku TV, Gun Parade March, and Sorcerer Hunters. An interesting 9 there. We'll start with the top row. Elazar, The Alternative World. I don't know if it's the same deal where I just enjoyed the characters and overlooked a lackluster story, but I gave it a 9. It was rated 6.78 on my anime list. The middle one is The Wanderers, which is the TV series, which is kind of a retelling of the El Hazard story. It's almost a 7. It's 6.92. I gave it a 9 also. I really enjoyed it as well.
I can't think of that show without thinking of International Channel and, as a result, Vonage.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Vonage was big on International Channel. And the last one was Mabarajo, which it was rated 6.73. I gave it a 7. I thought it was good. Kind of like you said. It was better than decent.
There has to be something between good and decent.
Yeah. So... the reviews are not
a lot of red over there.
A lot of red over there. It mentions that the music and art in the alternative world are a disappointment across the board compared to the magnificent world. I totally disagree because the opening theme
world had a banger open.
It had a banger open, like maybe the best open in the entire series, right there. Like I just don't know. Somebody's like, I usually like these type of anime. It just fails at so many levels. The plot is messed up by the horrible comedy. In this one, like compared to the first El Hazard OVA, this anime was trash.
Ouch.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like, I understand. Like, this was. I mean, what year did this come out?
Didn't the first OVA just have like some orchestral open or something completely underwhelming to me?
It was mostly orchestral music in the original, so the ending theme was not, but the opening theme and a lot of the background music were orchestral. So this aired in 1998. So. I would have to think this is one of the few series at that time that basically was an isekai within an isekai, because you had the main character Makoto Mitsuhara and his friends isekai'd from the real world to
yo dog. I heard you liked isekai.
Yes,
so I put an isekai inside your isekai.
So they're isekai'd in the magnificent world to El Hazard, and then because he has this weird technology thing at the end of the original El Hazard. Or right at the beginning of an alternative world, they're having like the wedding, and he touches something, and they isekai all of them to this alternative world, which is kind of a gloomy El Hazard world. And of course, they eventually find the Eye of God there, and all this other stuff. I enjoyed the series. I don't care what the haters say. This is one of my favorite ones of these 9. That opening is one of the ones where the opening didn't disappoint me because I enjoyed the series as well.
through the different series, didn't they also kind of like rewrite the characters as far as like what their relation to the main character was? Like, could that have drawn some negativity from people?
Could be, because the Wanderers, which is the second one up there, which almost got a 7. The main male character is basically in a relationship with the princess, Rune, Venus. In the alternative world, he's basically the harem protagonist. He's in a relationship with his childhood friend and several of the priestesses.
Much more true to life, really.
And then, the new water priestess that comes in the alternative world. So, yeah, I mean, not that the middle one wasn't a harem, but I felt like the middle one was a lot more paint by numbers. Like, the story was much more straightforward. It was a TV series. And I think because of that, the pacing of it is probably a little better, which is probably why people liked it. I like them both, maybe equally. The Wanderers the Wanderers also has banger music as well, yeah. English and Japanese. They have English dubs of the Japanese themes.
You can do that.
You can do that, and you can do it well. So
I did want to point out one thing. I can't remember which one it was, whether it was Alternative World or Wanderers. When you scrolled down to the recommendations, there were just like the 3 not recommends.
Yeah, that was the Alternative World.
Going back to earlier with the Shield Hero Season 2, obviously it's a newer show, so you're going to get more reviews. It had 39 recommends, 65 mixed feelings, and 92 not recommends.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Not great. So, and this is the reviews for the Wanderers were much more positive. There's only 3, and what's 1 recommended and 2 mixed feelings. So,
one of them's just a 2-word review.
Yeah, thankfully didn't get to that one, but
you can't print that.
Then we have Mabarajo, and I don't remember much about. There's a couple shows on this list I really don't remember much about, other than I remember that I enjoyed it. It's a harem anime, so that's gonna probably work against its score. It's a magic anime. I seem to remember the main character not having a lot of magic power, I think, if I remember right. But it was fine. Like, and the recommendation's a lot more positive for this one. 21 recommended, 5 mixed feelings, 8 not recommended. And, I think one criticism I saw is they were a little upset at JC staff for ending this after 1 season, that they thought that they had a lot of stories they could tell, and they just kind of... That's the end of it. And when you have that many characters, that's often the case. Now, I feel like we've gone the other direction now, and some of these long-running harem shows just never end.
Yeah.
We just continue to make another season of Rent-A-Girlfriend, and I saw a couple of Cuckoos just got announced for a new season, so it's like maybe we've gone too far the other direction. But
well, I also wonder, too, if some of those negatives are more recent reviews, because back when Mabarajo came out, I don't think there was the underwhelming, kind of pathetic protagonist fatigue that we have now. I feel like that is such an overused device. Back then, it really wasn't. Like, the underwhelming main character wasn't beat to death yet. But if you go back and watch it now with all the other shows that have come out since, you're probably more likely to have a negative impression just because it feels like kind of what they do all the time now.
And fair or not, like, because this was certainly an era where I was watching a lot of my anime dubbed. Because I was just getting the physical releases,
sure.
And if they had English on
it,
it was there. This has a really good dub. It's an ADV dub. It's got your big ADV actors, your Tiffany Grant, Jessica Boone, Blake Shepard, Jason Douglas, Monica Rial, Kelly Manchin, Christine Otten, Kira Vincent Davis. I mean, that probably also helped it a lot because that group put out a lot of really great dubs during that time. So I would guess that probably made me enjoy it maybe more than the subtitle version. So maybe some of those negative scores were that as well. So that was my top row. The next row... We've got Nadesco's movie, The Prince of Darkness, which is rated 6.72. We'll come back to that in a moment. I gave it a 7. Negima, both the Negima series, the first season and the second season, exactly the same score at 6.93. I put the first season in. I just thought I didn't like the animation style of the second season's a little, it's the same company that does all the Monogatari shows.
Oh.
So it's Shaft, I think, is it? So it has that same style. I don't know if it worked as well for Negima as it works for a show like Monogatari, but we're splitting hairs, obviously, because the scores are very similar. And Shikamori isn't just a cutie. It's a throwaway 12-episode show. I gave it an 8. It was 6.93 on my anime list. We'll go back. We'll come back to that one. Let's go to Nadesco the movie. Okay. I'm going to defend this a little bit because the TV series is an all-timer.
Absolutely.
Top 5, top 10 shows
no question.
all time. The movie, when judged against the TV series, is not going to hold up well because they kind of went a totally different direction. And I remember the first time I watched the movie, I was just on a stun lock by it. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Years later, when I went back and rewatched the series, I went back and watched the movie kind of with a new set of eyes and tried to give it a fair shake, kind of on its own. And I feel like the movie, if you just kind of take it in a vacuum, is really well done. The animation's great. The story, beginning to end, they kind of get there. It's just when you try to tie it with the TV series, it just doesn't make any sense. And why would you take these beloved characters and do this to them? So I put it on here because in the end, I probably did. And the movie, it certainly did well. It just wasn't. You see the reviews. There's, it's like he says, this movie isn't intended to be watched right after the anime with no information given. There was actually a video game that takes place between the TV series and the movie where a lot of important things happen.
So the video game is like part of canon then.
Yeah. So
That's
which it's called Martian Successor Nadesco, The Blank of 3 Years, which of course makes sense because, Ruri, who's the main character in the movie, is now the captain. She's in charge. And then, you kind of have to try to figure out what happened to the two main characters. It's a disaster as far as like timeline compared to the TV series. But as far as the movie in and of itself, in a vacuum, I thought it was fine. So I gave it a 7. Negima, we were just talking about Love Hina. Ken Akamatsu also did Negima. I've read most of the manga for Negima. I enjoyed it. I think it probably there, it's kind of one of those shows that maybe won't age well because of some of the things when you're dealing with high school students and some of the storylines maybe look as good years later, especially because Japan doesn't have the best reputation with those sorts of things. But I thought the story was fine, especially at a time where you had like Harry Potter coming out that, this was, I don't want to say this was the Japanese version of that because they're totally different stories, but it's kind of the same feeling where you've got the 10-year-old wizard who's the teacher, and then you've got all the students, and he's got to make pacts with all the students. And of course, he has to kiss them and make a pact. So, like, there's a lot of like gray area stuff there. So I kind of get the rating of that. Overall, I enjoyed it, so it got a good score. I gave it a 7. Shigemori is the one that just kind of, it's 6.93, which again, not a bad score. I gave it an 8. I know why it's rated this low, because I don't think a lot of people like the main character in this, the male character. They kind of thought he was a pushover. And the problem, I guess, when you have a very cool female lead with the male character who's kind of the one that gets bailed out all the time, is eventually that might wear thin with the audience. But it's got great music. It's got great people in it. It's, like somebody says here, like, this is a fluff rom-com. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not meant to be the next Anohana or something that is just, like, epic. It's just a fun throwaway one-season show. I think if you rate it with that in mind, I think 7 to 8 is very fair for this show. I kind of wish they'd make another season of it because I'd kind of like to see what happens to the characters. I, again, like the characters, want to hear more from them, but just kind of surprised to see it below 7.
I think it's a challenge when you create a show where the main character isn't the character that needs to develop as a person.
Yeah.
When they're kind of the enabler of the person who isn't further developing, I think, that can bother people.
Yeah, and I think that may be why. And again, I think there are people that maybe had just thought it was going to be more than what it was.
The only thing worse is when the main character is the dude who needs to develop and doesn't.
Yes, which there's plenty of those shows.
Something like Tokyo Revengers. As much as I enjoyed it, it was just like, this would be a lot better if this dude would become tough somewhere by episode 30. But he doesn't become tough by episode 30.
Yeah.
Like, man, if you're in a gang and you have a chance to redo your, significant portions of your life, the first thing you're going to do is learn to fight.
Yeah, that would probably be pretty important. So, so that's the middle shows. The bottom shows, I'll be honest, I watched Nuku Nuku because Megumi Hayashibara was in it, and the songs in that shows were really good. So for a while, like when I was kind of first getting into other shows, I watched pretty much anything that she was in. And this was just dumb fun. It's, even the first comment says it's one of the more underrated series of all time, calling it a buried treasure. I'd be curious to see. It's one of those ones I'd kind of like to watch again just to see how I feel about it now. It's just kind of you got Robot Girl high school student and all the shenanigans that come with it. And, I just remember it being a very fun show and little surprised it's so lowly rated. But again, I think that comes back to people trying to find it later and looking at it. And it's a show that was from 1998 again. So at the end of the Cell era of animation. So some of those shows, for whatever reason, don't hold up well today.
You just think, like, is there that group of people that were introduced to something like Cowboy Bebop, and then they're immediately like, well, 90s anime is the greatest thing ever. I'm going to go watch everything. And then they go and they watch something like this, and they're like, why don't I enjoy this? I don't understand.
This is Cowboy Bebop.
This is 90s. This is supposed to be the greatest anime of all time.
Yeah, and clearly didn't work out that way. Gun Parade March is another one that I need to go back and watch because honestly, I read the description and I don't remember it at all. But I gave it a really good score on Anime News Network. It got 6.70 on my anime list. I gave it a 7. It says it began in 1945, the end of the Pacific War. Alien invaders filled the Earth's skies and mankind was forced to confront an unprecedented threat. For the first time in human history, people of all cultures came together under one banner. This war has now been raging for over 50 years. Countless lives have been lost. The Japanese military is now forced to rely on young people such as Atsushi Hayami and his high school class known as Unit 5121. This new generation fearlessly struggles on with the aid of the HWT humanoid combat machines and the devastating PBE bomb from Media Blasters. I thought it was great. Like, the only thing I will say is the dub was not good. I did not. I watched like an episode or two of the dub, and it was not good to the point where I switched to the Japanese version. And I thought the Japanese version was excellent. I just really, really like this show. I kind of want to go back. There's also Gun Parade Orchestra, which is the follow-up to it. It's just one I don't remember much about, but I remember really liking it. So
yeah, it was one that I always thought would probably be pretty good. I was just thinking as you were going through the description of the show, is there any kind of like plot device that has become less realistic? It was never realistic to begin with, but it's become even increasingly so to the point of being absurd as a high school class doing anything to save the world.
Having worked with high school kids for the last 20 years,
it's getting less and less likely, guys. Us adults, we're going to have to learn to pilot the Gundams ourselves.
Probably so.
Kids aren't doing any of that. Just saying.
They are not likely, but and the last show, Sorcerer Hunters. This was one I was honestly surprised was rated so low. You and I both seen this one. I really enjoyed this show. You read the description of it, and maybe it doesn't sell it real well, but it says, in the continent of Spooner sorcerers, who are the continent's aristocrats, have begun to abuse their powers. Under the guise of Big Mama, their boss, Carrot, who turns into a giant monster every time he's placed under a magic spell, Gateau, a bodybuilder, Marin, a mage, Chocolate, and Tira, who can transform into dominatrix at will, must stop the evil sorcerers from picking on the weak. However, none of them, except maybe Marin, have a clue of what's going on. Yeah, maybe that description doesn't pull you into the show, but number one, it's got great music, which is what's going to get you in the door, but it's just, I just remember it being a very fun show, and the characters are well fleshed out, and it's got a really good cast. It's another show that I'm pretty sure I've watched both in Japanese and in English. Another great ADV dub with Brett Weaver as the main character, Jason Douglas, Tiffany Grant, Tamara Lowe. Like, it's got a really good dub cast. It's definitely one of those shows I'd be curious to see how it holds up all these years later, but I remember thinking it was a lot of fun.
I just think someone was like, I really like the Slayers, but it's just too serious.
Yes, can we make this more ridiculous?
Like, we need one that's funny. Like, wait, what? But yeah, great music. it is what it is. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's not Monster. It's not whatever your favorite deep psychological anime. It's not that. It doesn't need to be.
No, but I think it works. So that's my 3x3. Just shows that are rated below 7, and some interesting ones in there. But we're going to use more of these 3x3s as we go on. We've got some different topic ideas, and be curious if you're big into anime and you've got a lot of anime under your watch list. I'd be curious to see what our listeners' 3x3s look like for shows that are rated below 7 on my anime list, because there are certainly a lot of decent shows that are just maybe not well thought of. So
on eBay right now. I could purchase Kido Senkan Nadesco The Blank of 3 Years for Sega Saturn, Japanese import, complete for $17.99.
Oh man, might be
find a translation patch for it. Maybe that would be worth looking into.
Maybe something we have to discuss on a future episode to see what you think of that video game if you end up picking it up and are able to play it. So interesting stuff. Definitely an interesting topic this week, but that is going to bring this week's episode to a close of the Nerdcast Empire. Big thanks to everyone for joining us once again, whether you joined us live, whether you joined us on the VOD. We really do appreciate it. And if you are here, especially on the VOD, you're just stopping by, click that follow button. We're continuing to push for more followers, and we really appreciate everyone who has followed so far and everyone that joins us each and every week. Just a reminder, we'll be back on Saturday night for WWE SummerSlam review, probably 10:30 or 11 p.m. Eastern Time for that one, and then we'll be back Sunday night with another Music Weekly, the music of July the 19th on tap for Sunday night. Big thanks to Mike, as always, for joining me in the studio. Thanks to Chris. Hope you have a good time at your concert this weekend. Certainly look forward to seeing pictures and hearing more about that. And a big thanks to Stoveleg Media, as always, for their support of our podcast. But that's going to wrap things up this week for the entire crew. I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.